Vane has seen its biggest update since early access. In this video I go over the key changes, main bug fixes, updated features, and if you haven't already bought Vane, whether it's now worth a buy. Let's get into it. So we're going to break this video down into a few key areas and work our way through them. I will just say though that this video is not a replacement for the patch notes, so please don't treat it as such. You can see the full patch notes on the Steam store or by clicking the link at the top right of this video. The areas that we're going to break this video down into are balance changes, fixes, performance optimizations, and new things/additions, and then I'll go on to chat through whether now is the time to jump into Vane if you haven't done so already. Kicking off with balance changes, a few key ones to call out here are around the dismantling and scavenging stats. The XP gained by dismantling things has been cut in half, and the scavenging stat has been nerfed too. However, the cooldown for the scavenging stat has now been removed. Staying on skills, strength and vitality XP will now be modulated by the mass of the object you are moving. This means that if you're moving a big heavy bed or a fridge, you'll get more XP than if you're moving something like a chair, for example. Hunger and thirst will now damage you, so if you allow your playable character to get down to the starving or dehydrated statuses and leave your character in this state, they will now take damage. Whilst on hunger, MREs now take 50 years to decay. In terms of fortifications, explosives now do 6 times more damage to scrap metal fortifications. Beforehand they were almost impenetrable, now they're still incredibly strong, but they're not invincible. And finally, on balance, zombie spawns have been tweaked with updated spawning parameters. This should see the end of the frustration of clearing a house, only to walk outside, turn around, go back in, and see that zombies have respawned in there. That's it for balance changes. Next up, fixes. And on fixes, I think it's fair to say there's a lot to go through in terms of what the devs have been working on. You can imagine, being early access, a lot of time and effort is going to be focused on fixes. There's been a lot of localization fixes, crash fixes, exploit fixes, and some miscellaneous map fixes too. I'll call out some of the key fixes. There's been a fix to plants not growing when you're not around, so if you drove away from plants which you'd planted, then they would not grow if you weren't at your base. That has now been fixed. There's also been a fix to some strange building temperature behavior with a new algorithm introduced here. This obviously goes hand in hand with the introduction of thermostats and the ability to temperature control buildings. There's been some rain fixes too, so preventing rain from going through most buildings when you're on low quality graphics settings, and also a fix to rain going upwards at the bar and grill location, which, I mean, that sounds quite fun actually, rain going in reverse. But anyway, that's been fixed, so that is now out of the game. There's been a fix where there was an invisible wall on railroad tracks in Russia. As somebody who ran into it, I am very happy that that is now been fixed. There's been a fix for backwards fortified doors on the American Legion bar, fix for falling through basements, and fix any teleport locations that put you in the ground. Alongside that, teleporting while no clipping no longer makes you fall through the ground as well. So for those of us who have used the teleport function, you may have noticed a couple of things. One being that the teleport location could submerge you halfway into the ground, and in other locations you would just fall straight through the ground and end up getting into the water, unless you were quick enough to do the quick fly cheat. There's been some vehicle and physics fixes as well, so fix for the physics for the sedan and SUV2 being incorrect. There's been a fix for vehicles flying away when you load a save game when there's something on the vehicle. Fix for vehicle exploding away when loading into a save while sat in it. And then also a fix in multiplayer, which is quite a funny bug, where if you drove away and somebody was following them, it would leave the first player's ghost standing there, which is quite an amusing little bug in a lot of ways. There's then been some UI fixes as part of the UI work that Disseminate has been doing. So there's been a fix for workbench fluid text not wrapping, and also a fix for some windows not closing when you walk away from what you're using. So in some cases, if you're using a workbench and then walked away, then the window would stay open as if you were still stood at the workbench. There's been a possible fix for fans disappearing. So for those who may have noticed, if you got one of those desk fans and you took it and put it in your base, for example, you could load back in and they would just be vanished. There's a possible fix for that in place now as well. And there's also now been a fix put in for radiator sounds restarting over and over again. So you're not going to be bored by the humming of the radiator sounds. They should just be saved as consistent. There's also been a raft of sort of multiplayer and server-side fixes as well. One of them being that a fixed issue on dedicated servers with saved bad transform, where that was occurring as well. And that's it for fixes. And one of the key things, not just fixes, obviously, when we're talking about an early access game, is also performance optimization. And this is an area which the dev team have been working heavily on since the game came into early access last year. So there's now more efficient server heartbeat code, an increase in default actor partition batch size on dedicated servers, which should mean that vehicles will load faster. There's been a rewrite on how persistent decals and corpses are handled, which will hopefully see some network and performance improvements. There's been some landscape grass changes, upgraded textures on some fortifications, update to a lot of low resolution textures, so some furniture was low res. That has now been updated in a lot of cases. There's also been some changes to the sky and lighting, sky tweaks and fixes, some desync fixes for power and water in multiplayer, much faster load time to load into multiplayer games, which is very much welcome, a reduction to the amount of fog glow from lights, optimization of foliage performance and streaming distance. So if you're driving at high speed, for example, you should get less pop-in. There's been an improvement to the water graphics, an adjustment to interior lights for performance, undo vehicles getting stuck in ice. If you drove into ice in 0.022, then the vehicle would basically just freeze in place. That has been taken out so that now cars can drive on ice for the time being until a better solution exists. There's been a major rework of how UI windows will work, so in preparation for gamepad support. And additionally, there's been a whole raft of other performance improvements. Then there's sort of some other changes as well, which I'll cover off. So save games are now located in local app data in the Vein root folder, so they're not in the save game directory as they were before. The server browser will now display total player count, which will be a welcome addition for any server hosts. There's modification to how built furniture refunds you when destroyed, an update to the main menu text and credits. Hazmat suits will now block sunburns. There's updates to the fish journal and journal text, obviously as part of the huge fish update, so that the journal will have a much larger range of fish in it. There's an updated tooltip for Ore Crusher fuel slot, which did confuse a few players as to what was supposed to be in that location, but that's now been updated. And there's also been an adjustment to the tooltips for crafting recipe durations too. The build number will now be logged in the server log file. Only show inventory search clear button if there is a search present. An update to main menu news formatting, visual and lighting fixes, and now the watermark, which you could previously see at the top right of your screen whenever you were in game, will now only be shown in the experimental and will now be at the bottom left and is a lot less obvious than the one was previously. Right, now we move on to new things and additions. So I'm going to pick out a few key ones here. So first and foremost, let's talk about foliage. I know, exciting as it is, but the foliage has received a huge overhaul for this update. So we've got better looking trees, better looking grass in the game as part of 0.023. There's also been an addition of new vegetables and vegetable plants and seeds into the game as well. You can now grow artichokes, broccolis, cabbage, cauliflower, eggplants, garlic, and watermelon, and you'll find those seeds out and about in the world. Then in terms of hunting and fishing, there's new hunting related items which have been added. You can now dismantle birds that you've shot out of the sky. Blood meal and bone meal fertilizer now has functionality, but has also been added as an item into the game. There's now a baked fish recipe. The peristaltic pump has been added into the game as well for blood extraction. And so in terms of like the hunting stuff, it's amazing. There's the new hunting system, so you can skin, butcher, and process the limbs of an animal. There's fishing UI improvements as well, so it makes it a bit more obvious when you've caught a fish. And there's also been the addition of a Discover Every Wildlife entry cheat as well, for those of you who like to bend the rules a little bit, or just want to see what new wildlife is discoverable in that journal. In addition to that, we've got some zombie changes. So zombies can now have glasses or backpacks on. So if you're targeting a backpack, for example, you know which zombies to target. They've also done some changes to the zombie limbs. So they're now skeletal and will flop around as well, which is a nice little addition. We also know, of course, that the devs are recruiting a character artist for player characters, non-player characters. So in future updates, hopefully we'll see some changes to how zombies and players look, which would be cool. Romancer wouldn't let me get away without mentioning any new music, which obviously they've been working on. So we've got new music in the game, and also there's been the addition of some music to the radio in-game as well, courtesy of Romancer. So thanks very much to Romancer. Check them out on YouTube as well. We're also being treated to some new vehicle sounds, and also, crucially, the ability to hitch vehicles to one another. Now, please note, you're not going to be able to hitch trailers just yet, so those large generator trailers we are not going to be able to tow at this point. However, we will be able to tow one vehicle with another vehicle, which is a really nice addition. Another big thing, which is going to be something that we're going to see more and more of, is also gun animations. So the .38 Special has seen some improved animations. These are still work in progress, but is a really important step for us in terms of immersion and having some solid gun animations going forwards. We've also then got a couple of small changes. So the hazmat suit and rebreather now block smells. You'll no longer get sunburnt, for example, when you're wearing a hazmat suit. A couple of really small sort of quality of life things as well. It now costs you $1 to use air pumps, and you can use air pumps to refill oxygen tanks, gas canisters, etc. as well, which is a nice touch. You can also now fill fluid containers from gas tanks, etc. as well too, which is really cool to see. There's been a whole raft of additions in terms of UI. So day, month, year. Date setting is now available. So for the likes of me who doesn't operate on the month, day, year setting, I can now use the day, month, year setting. There's also a 24-hour time setting now as well, which is a welcome addition. Maps, records, video discs can now go in document shelves. Lockpick keys are rebindable. Trophies are equipable as weapons as well. One of the cool things that I like, which is really minor, is the addition of the item inspection menu, so that now you're looking at your an item in your inventory. You can click on it and you can inspect it properly as well. Finally, for those of us who unfortunately get infected, the introduction of the ability to end one's life has been added with firearms, and that is in the inventory screen as well when you click on a firearm as well. So yeah, a whole raft of additions, really, which I think are really exciting as part of this update. And I think that just about sums up the update. Again, for the full changelog, please do have a look at the Steam page. There's loads on there. I hope that this has helped sort of bring it to life a little bit more and to sort of pull out some key themes. I did also promise a segment on whether Vane is worth buying for those who haven't yet invested. So every time I do one of these videos where I'm talking through an update that is now being released, I think it's important to sort of call out for those who maybe haven't bought Vane yet, whether it's worthwhile doing so. So I'm going to break it down a little bit. So if you were someone who was waiting for full Steam Deck support or full controller support, then there's been some huge and significant improvement in that area in terms of UI, in terms of, you know, when you're using a controller now, it will show you which button you need to press rather than you're having to scroll and not really understand what you're having to do. So there's been major improvements there. However, it might be worth waiting until after 0.024 has released and onwards, because that's when the devs are aiming to have full controller and Steam Deck support in. However, there has been some major strides forward, so it might be worth jumping into the demo just to see the strides that have been made so far and see whether it's at a good enough level for you yet. If you're a player who's been waiting for further map expansion to have a bigger world to play and run around in, then there's been no change here in this update. So the early access map is still larger than the demo area and is planned to reach a final size of around 14 kilometers squared by 14 kilometers. with the next region likely to expand being some wild forested areas to the west and the south of Redford. But as I say, there's been no change on the map with this update. If you're someone who's been waiting for more polish before jumping in, then it depends really on what you wanted to be refined. So if the game becoming more balanced, that's going to continue. They've obviously made some strides in terms of balance for this update, and as more updates land, skills will be expanded and refined. And this update is great, in my opinion, in terms of moving us closer to the off-grid survival playstyle, but there's still a long way to go until that's really achievable, with things like base building and animal husbandry all further down the line on the roadmap. But this update has really pushed us closer to that reality. If you've been waiting for character polish, so in terms of zombies, player models, etc., then there's been no change here aesthetically. However, as I said earlier, the devs are recruiting a character artist, and also zombie spawning behavior will be a lot less frustrating after this update too. So yeah, it's obviously moving in the right direction in terms of early access, but if you're wanting a more polished product, then it's probably worth waiting for a bit longer. If you're on the fence, obviously the demo is there to try, and it's really important just to call out that the demo is going to be maintained in terms of the updates in the same way that the full early access version of the game is as well. The only thing that's going to be different in terms of the demo is obviously the skills cap at 50 and also the area that you play in. So that's not going to receive any further updates in terms of world. That will be for the early access map. There's a growing community of people, obviously, who are really enjoying the game, and I'm in that camp too, but it is early access. It's a small dev team with an ambitious timeline and roadmap, but it will take time to achieve. So if you don't jump in yet, make sure to subscribe, and I'll keep you up to date with all the latest on Vane in return. You can also watch my Let's Play series, which I kicked off with a new world and character on Monday. Watch episode 1 now. Until next time, I've been DeadZedje. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on Monday for another Let's Play episode, and on Wednesday for another Vane video.